What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down why the market saw a bit of a sell-off today as we got some more pieces of news that are very important. Why tomorrow is going to be another big day as there should be a high volatility again. What you should be watching for as time goes on looking at the current trends. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below, or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia plus a $100 cash reward. Deposits $10,000 or more to get $300 worth of Nvidia for free plus $100, or deposits $50,000 or more to get $1,000 of free Nvidia stock plus $100. You're also going to qualify for an 8.1% APY non-invested cash, and the offer ends very soon. So please use my link down below to sign up. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So looking at SPY, we got quite a bit of a sell-off today after forming this rising wedge, which panned out so far. And also, you guys can see that SPY has a much larger looking head and shoulders like pattern that is beginning to develop, and we're showing some signs of confirmation of a rejection. I would also like to see us lose this red line right here, our 200 EMA. I think there's a good chance we try to test that. And if we lose that, then yes, we're looking for a further decline down to retest the low we saw last Friday. Not just that though, but also like the lows from over here. All of these could be retested again. So we're going to break down exactly what's going on. Let me just quickly go over the news first. There was some news that came out that Zions Bancorp had tumbled 13.1% after the bank said that its profit for the third quarter will take a hit because of a $50 million charge-off related to loans made to a pair of borrowers. This is causing, once again, apparent misrepresentations, many kinds of like contractual defaults and such, which is not the best of pieces of news for borrowers, and this is leading to some fears amongst the loans. On top of this, another bank known as Western Alliance Bancorp, it also dropped 10.8% after saying that it has sued another borrower due to like fraud and such. There's been some negative news coming out for like different loans out there, lots of scrutiny that's rising in the quality of loans coming out from banks. And this is as a result leading to some downside, at least for them. I wonder if this is somewhat playing a role in the stock market selling off, because a lot of headlines are saying that this is why the market sold off. It could be part of the reason why. There's also other pieces of news coming out. So we have some news right over here that China is taking actions as though that they want to decouple with the US. And there's been a lot of talk about how, once again, we're seeing a lot of tensions rising between the US and China. China has threatened more action against the US if we do the same thing to them. That's what they claim. And then we're hearing that, once again, our US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Scott Bessent are also taking firm stances. They do not want to back down of the tariffs. They're not going to necessarily do that unless we see China basically make a very, very big deal. That's what they've been trying to say. So they're making their moves based off what China's going to do, but China claims they're doing the same thing back, right? So it's both sides that are kind of like arguing all of this out. In essence, this is leading to a lot of tensions right now, and the tensions remain at a high, which is having a very negative effect on the way at which the situation is being viewed, and it's having a negative effect on our stances right now. We also had our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent say that the U.S. won't change its negotiating stance on China due to the stock market volatility. They don't really care if this causes a dump or a big pump. They're here to negotiate, and they want to see a deal done as soon as possible. But they're not going to just back down just like that, right? They're playing the game of poker like I talked about. Will one side end up like folding their hand or not? That's what we're essentially waiting for. Now, at the same time, it's not all just like tension, tension, tension. We also have Scott Bessent saying that he has dangled with the possibility of extending a pause on import duties for longer than 3 months if China halts its plan to increase the strict export controls on these rare earth materials. So that's some important news. It's based off what China will do, and China's making their moves based off what the US will do. And if they end up kind of like deregulating, that would once again benefit the US, and then the US would once again deregulate on China. So that's what we're trying to say, at least so far. So there is still a lot of tension right now. That's also part of why the market has been selling off alongside seasonality. Don't forget that we do tend to sell off in the month of October, and we're forming a much larger head and shoulders like pattern. When it comes to President Trump, unfortunately, we didn't really get a massive announcement that affected the stock market too much. Although he was making a big announcement, it wasn't that relevant to the overall stock market. So he announced a deal with a manufacturer to make a common fertility drug cheaper for IVF patients. That's a very important piece of news, at least for that industry, but for the stock market as a whole, I don't think this really affected us way too much. And then besides that, President Trump also said that it's possible to get Putin and Zelensky together, according to the White House. And then we also had some more news that he is saying that he will see if we could put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war by getting the leaders to negotiate. So that's what we're seeing, at least so far, from President Trump. This could have an effect on the stock market if this ends up happening, but for now, we're going to have to wait and see. Besides that, keep in mind that for tomorrow, it's going to be Friday, October 17th. We just have a couple of Fed speakers in the morning and very, very minor data. There's not really much data affecting things, especially thanks to the government's shutdown. We're seeing lots of data being delayed. For the ninth time, we had a spending bill that passed the House, but it was not able to pass the Senate, which extends the shutdown. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing so far. For earnings, TSMC had good earnings, and Charles Schwab also had decent earnings overall. The majority of banks did well, although there are some questions about mid-sized bank loans, which is leading to some scrutiny. Now, tomorrow we have Ally Bank and a few more, and that's pretty much it. Nothing else that's too crazy. Then the fear and greed index is currently at extreme fear. Does this mean the market will try to bounce, or do we continue to fall? It's still possible we have some more room left to run. More room to fall. Excuse me, guys. Right now, fear makes up the majority of sentiment, and then the put to call option ratio is starting to climb as puts are being bought, and the VIX is now hitting extreme fears. It's starting to break out even higher. On top of this, when it comes to the options chain, just keep in mind that at least for tomorrow, we have over 800,000 plus of these calls expiring, but we do have a lot of puts expiring as well. We have essentially 2.8 plus million of these puts expiring for a 658 max pain. 3.42 is the puts to call option ratio. So what does this mean, at least for us moving forward? Well, when you look at the charts, okay, there's always going to be a bearish and a bullish case. And I'm going to talk about what is going to likely happen looking at these charts. So if you want to see this as a trap, I know some people are saying this is a trap, we're about to bounce big tomorrow. It's possible, but here's the thing. We need to hold above 665 for there to be some hope for bulls. If this is truly a trap, I want to see us hold above 665 to continue to pump. We need to get back above 665. And if we do, I do think we could be once again continue to test the highs. But if we can't get back above 665, if we fail to do so, then even if we get some kind of small bounce and we come short, we will likely continue to fall back down towards the 653 area, most likely to retest our 200 EMA. So we'll see if there's more news that comes out from President Trump involving his tariffs and such. But for now, I'm eyeing this setup. There's a possible left shoulder, a head, and a right shoulder forming. If we could hold above 665, though, I will be more apprehensive about this, and it's less likely that this pans out. But if we kind of pop and reject and we can't get back above 665, we're going to be favoring another downside move for 653 or below as the most likely possibility. So tomorrow morning, we'll see if the market bounces a little bit, maybe to like 662 or so. We might come short of 665, and if we can't hold those levels, then we're looking for another rejection. And I would not rule out 653 to 650 as our potential targets. There is a bigger downside risk, especially with this head and shoulders. As of right now, the head and shoulders narrative is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. The market has failed to really invalidate it. It's just getting stronger. There's a good chance it's going to pan out. There's a left shoulder, head, and right shoulder forming on the QQQ. It's quite evident. However, the QQQ did not dump that much. It's only down 0.3%. If we get back above 603, we're looking for 607. If we break that, we're back to bullish. But if we fail at 600, we could test like 601 tomorrow. If we reject again, and I see this consolidating, then retesting 595, then eventually 587. And we'll have to see what happens from there. Looking at the chart, we had a high up here. We came down. We made a lower high. And for now, we might pop a bit and start dipping back down towards 595, then 586. Those are the most likely possibilities. For other tickers, we have basically the IWM. As you guys can tell, we got a rejection off this bearish divergence. Now, here's the thing that's very interesting. The IWM is moving very similar to SPY and the QQQ. When SPY and the QQQ sell off, the IWM tends to sell off. When this bounces, the market also tends to bounce with it, right? We'll notice that we have this big gap down here. So even if we bounce a bit tomorrow, will we get some kind of rejection and eventually come down to fill this gap? I think that's the most likely case. We might bounce a bit for like 245 to 248, but if we can't hold above 245, we might just bounce a bit, consolidate, then slowly start to decline back down to 240, and eventually this gap fill to 237. So be careful as we have a big gap to fill. On ES, we also happen to have a head and shoulders like pattern. Now, if we can hold above this, essentially 6750 area, we're looking for a big breakout. If we reject and we can't hold above 6660, then we're looking for a big move right back down towards the 6600 area or below. Considering that we're making lower highs right now, this is looking a bit more bearish, although we might try to bounce a bit tomorrow depending on the news. For 6680, we are favoring that we're going to reject and continue to fall back down towards the lower 6600s as the most likely possibility. I will change my mind if we could reclaim like 6700 though, but for now it looks like we might just kind of pop and reject. Same thing with NQ. We have a very similar setup. We have a left shoulder, a head, and a right shoulder. Now, if we get back above 25,000, we're looking for a big breakout. This would be a trap. But if we pop a little bit around 24,900, we can't hold above 25,000. Then we're looking for a rejection, and this may continue to fall back down towards the lows from Friday. I do think there's a good chance NQ does that. There's a head and shoulders so far, so be very mindful of that. Bitcoin, it came down quite a bit. We're going to see if it could bounce a little bit back up towards 110,000, and then we're going to likely continue to fall back down to 106,000 or below, so be very careful. For Tesla, now what I see on Tesla is quite simple. We're going to actually eliminate these lines and just look at this very broadly. So look at the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder. Also notice that Tesla tried to break out only to reject. And then I'm also eyeing these gaps. There's a gap down here at 413, another gap at 397. We might be coming down to fill some gaps, so be very careful. We pumped, rejected, pumped, rejected, pumped, rejected many times on Tesla. If we get back above 440, we could invalidate the bearish setup and look more bullish. But if we come short and reject, we're going to likely continue to fall back down to fill this gap around 412. So you want to be very careful. On Nvda, we have basically 185 as our resistance and 178 as our support. I think we're going to consolidate and start dipping back down towards 178, and we'll see how it goes from there. On Appl, we're making lower highs over and over again. We need to get back above 250 to be bullish. If not, we could be dipping back down to 244. On Netflix, we're on a bit of a downtrend. Unless we hold above 1190, we're going to be favoring consolidation and a bit more downside to fill this gap back down to 1164. On MSTR, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We need to get back above 303. If not, we might pop back up to about 290, then continue to fall back down towards 278. Celsius is looking a bit more bullish, though. It's favoring 66 as our resistance, and we'll see how it goes. Supermicro is consolidating. It could be retesting 53.23, and we could be dipping after that. There is a head and shoulders like pattern, so it might consolidate and dip lower. On Palantir, we had a high, came down, we had a lower high, came down. Unless we break past 180, we're going to be favoring a move back down towards 175. Rivian's on a bit of a downtrend. As you guys could tell, we need to get back above 13.5 to be bullish. If not, we might reject. So far, it might pop a little bit back up to 13.18. Then we'll see if it rejects again off a head and shoulders. There is downside risk. On SoFi, we like to bounce near the support here, so it might bounce tomorrow back up towards our EMAs at 27.5, but then we're going to see if we get a rejection after that. On AMD, I'm looking for a test of 227. We need to bounce off that. If we don't, we're going to fill the gap back down to 219. So look for 227 tomorrow. We'll see if it holds. If not, we dip a bit more. ARM is trying to uptrend right now. We have support at 169 and 162. Might test 169, bounce a bit, then continue to fall, so we'll just have to see how it goes. For PayPal, we're actually making lower highs right here. We have support down here around the 65 area, and we have resistance up around 69. So overall, we're going to have to see how it goes. It might retest the 68 area, then we'll see if it turns back down or not. For Coinbase, we're technically on a bit of a downtrend. We have resistance around 337. We have support down here around 330. We're kind of in the middle, so we'll just have to see how it goes. So be very, very patient. However, there is support at 330. I think we could get a retest of our 200 EMA at 337. Then we'll see if it rejects and continues to fall for like 325. For Amazon, there's a quadruple bottom. It might bounce thanks to this tomorrow. So we could try to retest like 216.5 possibly. Then we'll see if it rejects again. But we're in a range right here. We do have a quadruple bottom forming, so there might be a small bounce coming. On Meta, we're technically on a bit of a downtrend. We need to get back above essentially 715 to 721 to bounce more. There's a chance we try to retest 715, then turn back down towards 707. So keep that in mind. It dipped quite a bit. It went from 257 all the way down to 250. Now it's trying to bounce a bit, so it might try to get back above 255, and we'll see if it rejects. If we don't hold 250, though, we're looking for 248, so we'll see how it goes. On Microsoft, we're making lower highs right here. We have resistance at 514 and support at 510. Might bounce for 514, then we'll see how it goes after that. Oracle's rejecting off this bearish divergence. It could be retesting 302 and eventually 297. So look for 302 and we'll see if we bounce or not. And then for other tickers such as DJT, we're technically on a downtrend. We have a nice double bottom here, so it might try to bounce a bit for this 16 area. The VIX is breaking to the upside right now, and there's no sign that it's stopping. So I'm going to actually zoom out more on the daily time frame. What you see on the VIX is that this is breaking out. I also want to note that there is some tough resistance at 25, but there's no sign it's stopping. And there are a lot of gaps to fill. There's a gap at 30, another gap over here around 37. Could this be indicative that the market's going to see more downside? It's very possible. Please keep that in mind. The 10 years dipping, which is not really affecting things. The dollar's dipping. So is crude. So we're going to see how this ends up affecting things. But for now, the stock market does favor bears. Now, tomorrow, in the morning, we could bounce a bit on SPY and retest 662.5 or a little bit above that. But if we can't hold or close above 665, the downside pressure is still going to be there. And there's going to be a risk of this head and shoulders like pattern on SPY and the QQQ of panning out. So could we bounce in the morning? Yes, we might bounce for 662.5 or a little bit above that tomorrow. Be prepared for that just in case. But if we can't get back above 665, then I think SPY may continue to fall into like the 650s to 655 and 653. Same thing with the QQQ. Although it's not looking as bad, we could bounce tomorrow for 602. If we break that, we could be going a little higher. But if we fail to get back above like 607, what could happen is we make a lower high in like the 602 zone, and then we may continue to fall back down. So please be very careful. There's a much larger head and shoulders like pattern. Is it a trap? In order for this to be a trap, we have to break resistance and invalidate these setups. As of right now, there's no invalidation. The setups are very valid and they are more likely to pan out. So we might get a small bounce tomorrow morning, but then there is a risk of more downside, especially if we get more news involving China, if some other catalyst comes out that drops us, and also because of seasonality. This is no surprise so far. So I thank you all for listening. I'll be back tomorrow before market open with another update. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll be back very, very soon. Have a good day, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and I'll give you guys more updates involving the whole situations in the news. Until then, take care and peace out.